Always lock your doors.
I work on a small dairy farm in the upper Midwest. It kind of has a weird layout, but I'll try my best. Right when you walk in, there's the milk house. Then you keep going and you're in the parlor. Once you go to the edge of the parlor, you can turn left into our calf barn, or right and make your way out to the big barn where the milking cows are. Also, I should mention that the calf barn is connected to an older barn that we keep pregnant cows in. The doors are never locked because we have people coming in at random times throughout the day. Plus, it's a barn, and there are doors literally everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Anyways, I'm a female who is fairly tiny, maybe 5'5", 120-ish pounds, and mind you, I'm still in high school. One night I was working the night shift, so anywhere between 8:30 and 2 a.m., because you never know how long barn might take sometimes. Every shift we work with one other person, and this night happened to be with another high schooler about my age, but she's a bit taller than me. But every shift we milk the first pen, then I'll go into the calf barn and turn the lights on and start the pasteurizer so I can feed calves. So I went and did that, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and I went back to help milk the second pen. After the second pen, I went to feed calves. So here's the layout of the calf barn. There's an alley down it with the weaned calves on the left and hay and grain on the right for feeding. Then at the end of it is a big room. There's a row of 7 hutches right as you walk in from left to right, then 2 in the left corner. Then there are 6 pens, 3 on each side with a little milk house in the middle for feeding purposes. The doors to the milk house are always closed to keep it warm in there, so I go in there and start my normal feeding routine, still not noticing anything strange. Then I open the door on the other side of the milk house to feed the far pens, and that's when I noticed the older, almost weaned calves in the right pen were very skittish. I ignored it at first and went about what I was doing, and then I saw him, a man, huddled in the corner of the pen, just sitting there, in all black and bundled up because it was cold as hell out that night. But he sat there just looking at me, smiling. In between those 2 far pens is a double door that again isn't locked, making it easy for someone to get in. Anyways, I was holding a 5-liter bucket filled with milk, and I dropped it, spilling it all over the ground, and I never booked it so fast out of there. I told my coworker what happened, and we hid out in the break room for a little bit with our barn dog. We eventually got the courage to go back and check it out, but the man was gone, and the double doors were wide open. Thinking back, we should have called the cops on him for trespassing, but he never threatened us or the cows, and nothing went missing. I don't know if he was a homeless man looking for shelter in the cold or what, but my barn is a tad far out of town for that. What scares me most is that when I walked in there, more than once that day, I still didn't even notice him, so I have no idea how long he had been watching me. I've worked 2 night shifts since then, and I work another one tonight. Since then, I've been sure to scan the barn and lock the doors while I'm feeding. So a note to everyone, not even just farmers: always lock your doors. And to the creepy man in one of my calf pens, let's not meet.
Update.
Hey guys, here's a little update on the guy that was in my barn a bit ago. I did see him again, but I'll get to that. Plus, some of my coworkers have noticed some things. So I worked 2 night shifts again this past weekend, and there are certain doors in the barn that can't lock, even if I want to do so. I just have to be extra cautious about it. One of those nights I got there early in hope of maybe getting off before midnight. That being said, I was the only one there for a little bit. Stupid, I know, but I was tired and thought it'd be nice to have a head start. I went out to the big barn to get the first pen of milking cows. I just remember feeling overall uneasy. It might have been just me being paranoid given the previous situation. Well, that night I thought I saw someone lurking in the pasture in which we had the heifers in earlier. I couldn't see because it was dark, but I swear I saw that all familiar smile with the little light I had coming from the silos. But I figured I was hallucinating, being a little skittish, so I brushed it off and went into the barn. I almost had the first pen to the parlor when my coworker showed up. We continued the night as usual, and then I had to go start the pasteurizer. Of course, I didn't want to, but I had to. I went in there and the calves seemed fine. Everything seemed perfect. I looked around. Not hard enough, you'll come to find. And everything was good. I went back to help milk the second pen. After that pen, I went to feed the calves while my coworker went to get the third pen like usual. Like I said, everything seemed fine. I was probably in there for around 20 minutes feeding the hutch calves bottles, which typically takes longer. And we had 6, so it took a little bit. Then I went to the far pens where I saw the man last time, and everything was okay. Then I went to feed the middle pens, and that's when something didn't seem right. One of the calves was laying down and refused to get up to eat, so I hopped the fence to help it up. Just a note, I set the pail of milk on the ground in between the 2 middle pens. I turned around once I got the calf up, and there he was. This time he was standing and still smiling. I still couldn't really see his face because it was covered, but he was wearing the same clothes, which was weird because it was 60-something degrees out that night. He wasn't overly tall or big. He just had a really creepy appearance and smile. He didn't say anything, he just smiled. I have a knife on me for work purposes, usually to cut baling twine. So I pulled that out just to have it, and then I jumped the fence again and ran back to the parlor just as I had the last time. I was working with the same girl, and me and her literally locked ourselves in the break room again and called our boss. He got there and we went to the calf barn again, and everything was just as I left it, except for one thing. The milk pail that had previously been filled to a mark on it was now empty, and the milk was all over the ground around it, but the pail was placed back upright. My boss didn't know what to tell us, but he stayed at the barn for the rest of the shift. My other coworkers started reporting things going missing, cows being moved, lights turning on and off, doors being left open, and milkers being turned off. One even said that the man was sitting in one of the empty calf hutches, and they didn't realize it wasn't a calf until they went to feed it, and he was just smiling at them. The cops had been notified, and we now have a cop parked by the barn every other night, and one that stays in the area at all times. I don't know where he was when I checked the barn before I started feeding because he wasn't in that pen. I checked. He definitely has some sort of hiding spot that I didn't see him, or he was moving around the milk house as I walked through it or something. But this guy really creeps me out, and lately I've been turning down night shifts. I'll keep you guys updated on how the cop thing works out, and if I ever see him again. This whole thing just really freaks me out because I love my job and the people I work with, but I hate being afraid to go to work. So to the guy who keeps showing up in my calf barn, please never come back, and let's never officially meet.
Final update.
I want to start off by saying thank you for everyone's concern over what's going on. Everything's beginning to come together. So anyways, since the last update, the same things have been occurring, like things going missing, cows being moved or let out, just things like that, and just the overall feeling of being watched. Plus, there's been a few mastitis cases recently because people have been half-ass milking to get out of there fast. One thing that stood out to me most was one night I was feeding and used my knife to cut some baler twine and set my knife on a bale while I was spreading some of it out. I guess I forgot to grab my knife before I went back in to milk because at the end of my shift I realized I didn't have it, so I went back for it, but it was gone. I kinda brushed it off and thought maybe I dropped it in the hay while I was feeding and one of the cows swallowed it. Since it is common in cows to swallow equipment because they don't chew, hardware disease, and I was kinda just like, shit. But I called my boss and told him and things were good except that I no longer had a knife. So let's cut to tonight. I have only just gotten home, so it's close to 2 a.m. right now, which normally I'll get home around midnight if we're talking average, so it's been eventful. Anywho, I went to feed the calves, and as I walked through the weaned calf alley, I noticed hay coming through the ceiling and some shuffling. The hay loft is directly above the alley. I kind of ignored it and went about what I was doing, thinking maybe it was an animal like a mouse or even a cat. I was in the calf room at this point, and all of a sudden a full 45-pound hay bale just gets thrown off to the side of the loft, which I could see from an opening to the right of the hutches. Those bales were nowhere near the edge where they could fall, so that bale was clearly thrown. It was around 11 p.m. and I was scared shitless. I went and got my coworker who was a guy in his 20s and we went up to the loft. We were only up there for not even a minute before we saw the man. He had kind of made a little makeshift house or fort with the hay bales and was just sitting there staring at the ground. He must not have noticed us, but we got out of there and called the police. They got there within 20 minutes, and so did our boss. They caught the guy who we later found out was a 53-year-old male who spent the last 20 years in a mental facility, only about a half hour from the barn. He was released by his family against medical advice sometime about a month or so ago and went missing shortly after. He had been living in the barn all this time. I'm not sure what he'd been eating or how we hadn't noticed him or anything in the loft previously. I suppose he was hiding toward the back of it. But we finished chores while the police continued to search the barn, and the thing I found most unsettling is they found my knife clenched in his fist. It's a pocket knife, so it was probably easy to miss. I don't know how messed up he is in the head or what his intentions were with my knife, but I'm also glad I will never have to find out. He is also now legally considered a threat to society, and his family no longer has the authority to release him from the facility. My coworker, boss, and I were finally allowed to leave around 1:30 a.m. after they found everything they needed, so I'm hoping that's the end of that. So, to the mentally insane guy who's been living in my barn for the last month, let's not meet again.